News of the times, fear and favour in Kensington, the woman in black and the murder of Augusta Dawes. In the winter of 1894, one of London's wealthiest boroughs was gripped by fear. A veiled woman in black was stalking the streets of Kensington, slashing unsuspecting women with a hidden blade. Her victims, all well-dressed and respectable, were attacked in broad daylight, and Scotland Yard were called in to investigate what the press dubbed the Kensington outrages. Then, as suddenly as the attacks began, they stopped. And at the very same time, another unsettling case played out behind closed doors just streets away. A respected society woman, Augusta Dawes, was found dead, and a young man from a prominent and well-connected family was accused of her murder. But the courtroom drama that followed raised eyebrows. Legal manoeuvres, family money, and a declaration of insanity meant the accused would never stand trial. Two disturbing threads, one elegant neighbourhood, and even a sinister letter to police signed Jack the Ripper. Was it all coincidence, or something far deeper beneath Kensington's genteel facade? And in today's end of episode further particulars segment, a farmer, a dark crossroads, and a headless woman in black who simply refused to budge until she floated straight through a hedge. Buckinghamshire swears it wasn't the cider. Before we let tonight's tale loose, a small favour for the restless spirits of YouTube. Give that like, subscribe and share button a brisk tap. Yes, even if you're the sort who spends evenings crafting corpse jewellery behind a very heavy veil. Or, if you're feeling reckless, prod the mysterious new hype button. Apparently, it feeds the algorithm extra midnight snacks. Why? Because the algorithm is no mere code. It rises from its coffin at midnight, cape swirling, and only settles when properly entertained. Now then, draw the curtains, light the candles, and let the October chill in. It's time to sit back, settle deep, and enjoy the show. Background. In 1894, Kensington was among London's most refined and desirable addresses, a leafy enclave of polished townhouses, private gardens, and afternoon teas served on silver. It was a world of governesses and drawing rooms, of laced gloves and charity committees. Residents took pride in their respectability, and even the police tread carefully in these upper-crust districts where scandal was considered worse than sin. But Kensington was also a place of deep contrasts. Though the borough boasted some of the wealthiest households in the empire, it sat cheek by jowl with areas of quiet poverty, unseen maids, laundry women, and errand boys living in cramped muses behind elegant facades. The year 1894 brought more than just fog and frost to Kensington Street. Beneath the genteel surface, fear was rising. A veiled woman in black, said to glide silently before striking, was attacking women seemingly at random, and behind closed doors, a society murder was about to shock even the most jaded readers of the Times. It was a year when Kensington's genteel mask slipped, and what lay beneath was anything but civilized. From the Globe, the 26th of November, 1894. Terrible tragedies. Woman murdered at Kensington. Shortly before 2 o'clock this morning, murder was discovered in Holland Villas Road, Kensington. A passer-by was horrified to find a young woman bleeding from a gaping wound in the left side of the throat, lying on the edge of the pavement near the Addison Road Bridge, and it at once raised an alarm, and police constables from the division came upon the scene. He saw that a terrible tragedy had been enacted and promptly summoned aid from the divisional police. In the district the discovery was made, it was then seen that life was extinct, and upon removal of the body to the Kensington mortuary, Dr. Townsend, the divisional surgeon, was at once summoned. He found that the unfortunate woman had a deep wound about 4 inches long, severing the main artery in the neck and causing blood to issue freely. It is supposed that this was inflicted with a knife or other sharp instrument with a powerful downward stab. The only clue which the murderer left behind was his walking stick, which he undoubtedly forgot in the hurry. It is of ordinary cherrywood with a hook handle. The woman, who was one of the unfortunate class, is said to have been good-looking and about 30 years of age, with dark hair and eyes. She wore a black skirt with red striped bodice, low shoes, and a black hat trimmed with white satin. On the third finger of her left hand she wore 2 common dress rings, and in her pocket was discovered a handkerchief, 6pence in silver, and a few coppers. Her body has not yet been identified, and the whole affair is enshrouded in mystery. At the time, the early morning discovery of a murdered woman near Addison Road Bridge, throat savagely cut, a trail of blood on the pavement, and nothing left behind but a cherrywood walking stick. It sent ripples of unease through Kensington, but with no clear motive, and the victim labelled only as unfortunate. The public horror was, for a moment, containable. That changed within days, because before the shock of that killing had fully faded, more reports began to emerge, not of murder this time, but of violence just as baffling. Seemingly random attacks, all in the same refined stretch of Kensington. No robbery, no clear motive, just sudden, slashing injuries, and a woman in black. From the Globe, the 3rd of December, 1894, stabbing at Kensington. 2 strange outrages, a mysterious assailant. Considerable excitement was occasioned yesterday by the publication of a report that another affair closely resembling the Kensington murder had been committed in South Kensington on Saturday night. Inquiries made yesterday showed that the report was based upon a very remarkable stabbing case which occurred in the neighbourhood of Stanhope Gardens, and which strongly resembles a mysterious assault committed recently in the same locality. A fortnight ago, a Mrs. Haynes, a caretaker employed in one of the adjacent mansions, was proceeding through Stanhope Gardens towards her home between 10 and 11 o'clock at night, when she was accosted by a woman dressed in black and wearing a thick veil, of about 50 years of age, who stopped her with an inquiry respecting some place in the neighbourhood. After a few moments, the unknown woman, who spoke in somewhat husky voice, said abruptly, "Is this the way to Queensgate?" Mrs. Haynes replied in the affirmative, when suddenly the woman, with an insulting explanation, raised her hand and struck Mrs. Haynes a violent blow with some sharp instrument in the face, inflicting a serious wound just below the right eye. The woman then walked leisurely away. Mrs. Haynes screamed loudly, and in a few moments a constable arrived. The constable made a hurried search for the woman, who by this time had disappeared. Assistance was procured, and Mrs. Haynes was conveyed to St. George's Hospital, where she was detained as an inpatient. So serious were her injuries that her right eye had to be removed. Every effort was made by the police to secure the perpetrator of the outrage, but without avail. A description of the woman was circulated amongst the police of the division, but nothing more was heard of until Saturday night, when the same woman, it is believed, made an attack upon another person at a spot not very far from the scene of the attack on Mrs. Haynes. About 11 o'clock, a servant girl employed at a house in Stanhope Gardens was returning to her employer's residence when she was accosted by a woman, the description of whom closely tallied with that given by Mrs. Haynes. The strange woman asked the girl the nearest way to Stanhope Gardens. The girl replied, "This is Stanhope Gardens." Thereupon the woman immediately made an attack upon her, stabbing her in the face with some sharp instrument and inflicting a wound which, however, is not of a serious character. On striking the blow, the woman used precisely the same words as she used in the case of Mrs. Haynes. In this instance also she is said to have again made no haste to escape, but walked slowly away in the direction of Queensgate. The girl was knocked down by the force of the blow, but immediately recovered her feet, and seeing a man and a woman approach, reported the occurrence to them. The man took the injured girl to Police Constable Ormston, who was on duty at the Gloucester Road station. She was then taken to a neighbouring surgery where her wound was attended to, and she was enabled to proceed to her home. The following is a description of the assailant, about 50 years of age, 5'2" in height, dressed in a dark jacket and a dress, and wearing a thick black veil. This description has been distributed amongst the police, who are keeping a sharp lookout for the woman. No motive can be assigned for the outrages. A correspondent writes, "Today, the excitement in the West End remains unabated, and there is a general consternation that in one of the more efficiently guarded and best patrolled districts in the metropolis, such crimes should be possible. Consequently, upon the affair in Stanhope Gardens, a large number of plain-clothes men from Scotland Yard have been drafted into the neighbourhood, and throughout last night extraordinary precautions were taken. Every side street, square, and avenue was closely watched with view to effect capture. The police are naturally reticent on the subject, but it seems extremely doubtful if, so far, they've obtained a tangible clue." It was stated by a police officer today that the authorities do not for one moment believe in the theory that has been put forward that in the Queensgate and Stanhope Gardens affairs the deeds of violence were performed by men disguised in women's clothing. The whole of the facts that had come within the knowledge of the police, indeed, went to prove exactly the contrary. The theory entertained was that these assaults on respectable women were the acts of a female lunatic. That seemed to him to be the most likely solution of the mystery. It was not for one moment thought that a man was involved in the case. Further, it was considered extremely doubtful if any real connection could be established between the murder case in the Holland Park Road and the two other incidents which had caused such a stir in the public mind. The latest report, which has appeared in the papers with the actual details of what really did occur in Stanhope Gardens Saturday night, was, so far as he knew, substantially correct, although he considered the whole business had been exaggerated. It was, however, impossible to deny that the affair had thrown the neighbourhood into a state of alarm. At first there was hope, faint but persistent, that these attacks were disturbing anomalies, perhaps three unfortunate coincidences, unnerving but unconnected, the sort of strange, isolated events that the city, in all its complexity, occasionally produces. But that hope began to unravel. Despite a surge of plainclothes officers patrolling Kensington's quiet streets and Scotland Yard's discreet but undeniable presence, the unease in the neighbourhood lingered, and with good reason. For just 2 nights later, yet another report emerged. No blood was shed this time, but the encounter bore all the same uncanny hallmarks, and this time there were witnesses ready to flee at the first whisper of danger. From the Globe, the 5th of December, 1894, the mysterious stabbing cases. Another strange story. Another strange affair is reported from Kensington. It has transpired that between 8 and 9 o'clock on Monday night, 2 domestic servants left a house in Camden Hill Road in Kensington with the intention of proceeding to Young Street for the purpose of dropping letters into the local pillar box. As they were proceeding up the thoroughfare, they were suddenly accosted by a woman of diminutive form in black attire, with her face thickly veiled, who inquired the nearest way to a neighbouring thoroughfare. One of the girls turned to make a reply, when suddenly she saw movements of the arm from the unknown female, and at the same time heard an exclamation. The expression used was precisely similar to that reported to have been made use of in the stabbing affair at Queen's Gate and Stanhope Garden, and the young people hearing it at once recollected the scare that exists in the neighbourhood and fled from the spot. When they finally halted upon the appearance of a police constable, they at once communicated the cause of their alarm, but the woman in question had then disappeared. The 2 servants afterwards proceeded to the police headquarters in High Street, Kensington, and gave detailed descriptions of the woman in black by whom they were threatened. The description tallies exactly with that given to the victims of the 2 previous outrages. No arrest has yet been made. As police flooded Kensington streets with plainclothes officers and lantern-lit patrols to catch the mysterious veiled stabber, attention also turned back to the killing that had first unsettled the district. Even while neighbours whispered about the woman in black, the coroner was opening an inquest on Augusta Dawes, the unfortunate woman found days earlier with her throat cut near Holland Park Road. Her death, brutal and silent, now formed the grim starting point of what many feared was a single, escalating wave of violence. From the Shields Daily Gazette, the 29th of November 1894, the London Murder Mystery. At Kensington Town Hall this morning, an inquest was opened by Mr. Drew, Coroner for West London, on the body of Augusta Dawes, otherwise known as Dudley, who was found dead with her throat cut in Holland Park Road, Kensington, early on Monday morning last. The first witness was Lillian Cremer, who identified the body as that of a woman who had resided with her till recently. Deceased received letters in the names of Augusta Dawes and Augusta Dudley. Witness last saw her alive on Sunday night. Deceased, whose body she identified on Monday morning, drank to excess. Kate Forsyth, a married woman living at Hammersmith, set the deceased live with her 18 months ago and went in the name of Augusta Dawes. Deceased had 2 children. For one she received 25 shillings a week, and for the other 5 shillings. she had not been seen deceased for 12 months until a fortnight ago. Herbert Sorber, a retired tradesman, spoke to finding the body while he was out on his way to fetch his daughter from a ball. Mr. Carbold, an artist, said that he and the last witness went for the police. He thought there had been a struggle as blood lay all around. He heard no screaming, although living close by, and the night was very dark. 2 constables, having given evidence, asked to be called to see the body and finding a walking stick near to it. Dr. Townsend, divisional surgeon, said that when he arrived on the spot, the woman was dead, but death had occurred very recently, as the body was still quite warm. The wound in the throat was clean cut. He did not think there had been a struggle. He ordered the removal of the body to the mortuary. The doctor added that great force was used as the vertebrae was cut. The remarks of finger pressure on her throat, and he was satisfied the case was not one of suicide. A post-mortem examination showed that nearly all the organs were healthy. The deceased had had a child. Reginald Saunderson was barely 21, the well-connected son of Llewellyn Saunderson of County Dublin. A family respected on both sides of the Irish Sea, tall, well-spoken, and from a privileged upbringing. He had been living quietly within a specialist school near London. Friends described him as gentle and affectionate, although prone to brooding. In late November 1894, he slipped away from his school without explanation, wandering Kensington's late-night streets. Newspapers later reported that he had shown a fascination, almost morbid interest in sensational murder trials, following every detail of the recent James Canningham Reed case. On the night of the 25th of November, he is believed to have encountered Augusta Dawes near Addison Road Bridge, where she was found with her throat cut. Instead of returning to his London lodgings, Saunderson headed instinctively for Ireland, the landscape of his childhood. Detectives quickly linked him to the Holland Villa Road murder. A warrant was issued, and he was arrested near Kilshedra in County Cavan within days. Scotland Yard made it clear that there was no connection between this crime and the infamous Whitechapel murders, despite early rumours. What remained was the startling contrast between Saunderson's polished family background and the brutal violence of the crime for which he now stood accused. From the Globe, the 5th of December, 1894, Kensington murder, the singular development, latest details. Some further details have now come to light regarding the young gentleman Reginald Saunderson, who, as reported in the Globe last evening, has been arrested on suspicion of murdering the woman Dawes. He is the second son of Mr. Llewellyn Traherne Bassett Saunderson, J.P., who resides in Devetches Terrace in Kingstown. Colonel Saunderson MP is his uncle, and one of his sisters married a brother of Mr. H. L. Mulholland, MP for North Derry, and heir to Lord Dunleith. On the maternal side, the unfortunate young fellow is related to other titled families, his mother being a daughter of the 3rd Earl of Clonel, and an aunt being the present Lady Monk. His mental condition has often caused anxiety to friends and relatives, but it had never developed itself to such an extent to suggest the possibility of homicidal mania. Ordinarily, in fact, he was of a quiet disposition. He was placed as a pupil in an institution for gentlemen with mentally affection, under the supervision of Dr. Langdon Down of Harley Street at Eastcote in Hampton Wick. Since the commencement of the Southend murder case, the young man has taken quite a morbid interest in the prisoner, Reed, and during the past few weeks he has read with avidity all the newspapers published referring to the case. On Sunday, November the 25th, Reginald Saunderson absconded from Eastcote and, on the understanding that he was attending a local church, escaped from supervision and reached London. Here he seems to have strolled about Kensington until a late hour, and then met the unhappy woman Dawes, with the result that he is now accused of her murder. After the murder, Saunderson drifted recklessly between friends and relatives. He first called on an acquaintance for a loan, taking more than 26 shillings in the end, and used the money to reach Belfast, where he briefly stayed with a family connection. From there, detectives traced him to Dublin, where he is thought to have visited his father's empty house before buying a ticket for Cavan and hiring a car to Nahila House near Beltrubet, the home of old family friends. His manner there was so erratic that his hostess consulted a doctor about his sanity, but no action was taken. The next morning, Sergeant Mount of the Royal Irish Constabulary quietly arrested him on a capital charge. Saunderson broke down, but offered no account of where he had been when Augusta Dawes was murdered, and he was remanded to Armagh Jail to await the arrival of Scotland Yard detectives. Dr. Down interviewed. A representative of the Press Association, on inquiring last night at Dr. Langdon Down's establishment at Hampton Wick, was informed by Dr. Down that Saunderson had for 5 years past been a resident at Eastcote. At home in Ireland before coming to Eastcote, he was given to playing truant and various mischievous tricks, which suggested that he should be removed and put under stricter control. Although thus controlled by the masters at Hampton Wick, he was not put under restraint, as if he had shown any decided symptoms of lunacy, he would have been removed to a lunatic asylum. He came of age on the Friday before the murder, and this naturally terminated the conditions upon which he had been originally enrolled as a pupil of the school. In view of the fact that he might soon be leaving to go out into the world, and having regard also to the fact that his relatives suggested a colonial career for him, Dr. Down had a talk with the youth 2 or 3 months ago on the subject, and suggested that, by the way of training and possible need of manual work in Canada, he might in the meantime do a little digging or other gardens work at Eastcote. The youth readily fell in with this suggestion, and the knife with which the murder alleged to have been committed was one which he used in the garden. It is really a knife made for carpentry work, but Saunderson had borrowed it from one of his fellow pupils for gardening. He took it away with him when he suddenly and unobservedly left the place on the Sunday of the murder, and he also took with him a borrowed cherry stick. Investigators quickly ruled out any prior link between Saunderson and Augusta Dawes, but an eyewitness proved crucial. Hidden beneath an arch that night, he sensed violence unfolding and stepped out just in time to see a man fleeing. The stranger sprinted down Holland Park Road, cut through Addison Road and into Kensington High Street, doubling back towards a dead end near Farmer's Library. Along this desperate route, a bloodied knife, later identified as Saunderson's, was found, likely tossed aside in panic to shed the most damning piece of evidence. Saunderson in jail. Saunderson, who feels his position acutely, slept very little last night. He was not placed in the cell ordinarily allotted prisoners arrested on serious charges, but is confined in a large airy room on the first floor of the prison. After being locked up, he asked the prison officials' favour to be allowed to wear his overcoat. He also requested that he might be permitted to use the rugs which he had travelled with, and that a fire might be lit in his room. Captain Chippendale complied with his wishes. He was, however, deprived of a penknife found upon him, and the officials also took possession of some letters and some other articles. At the inquest, witness after witness placed Augusta Dawes alive and talking with a well-dressed man near midnight. Moments later, a thud and her cry of "Brute!" broke the silence. One man gave chase as the stranger ran into the dark, dropping a crook-handled walking stick, and further along the blood-stained knife later proved to be his. The paper trail was just as damning. A teacher recognized Saunderson's handwriting on a taunting letter to the police signed Jack the Ripper, and a Harrow acquaintance recalled how the young man calmly described seeing a dreadful murder near Holland Park Road, even borrowing money to keep moving. On this evidence, the jury found that the deceased woman was murdered and that the cause of her death was hemorrhage from wounds in the throat inflicted by Reginald Saunderson. What followed was a grinding round of hearings and adjournments as the Saunderson family considerable influence went to work. Lawyers of the highest caliber were retained, and medical experts paraded in support of a single aim: to prove their young kinsman legally insane. Inside prison, meanwhile, Reginald was unfailingly polite and even charming. Warders found him a model guest who slept little, asked for rugs and a fire, and chatted easily, yet he never once offered a word about the night Augusta Dawes was murdered. In the end, power, wealth, and a meticulously prepared defence prevailed. After weeks of argument, the case reached the Old Bailey, where the question was no longer guilt, but capacity, and the court prepared to hear whether Saunderson could even stand trial. From the Globe, the 30th of January, 1895, the Kensington murder. Prisoner unable to plead. At the Old Bailey today, in the case of Reginald Saunderson, it was stated that the prisoner was of unsound mind and unable to plead. The prisoner was ordered to be detained during Her Majesty's pleasure. In the end, the wealth and influence of the Saunderson family, combined with the skillful legal defence, carried the day. The Old Bailey ruled that Reginald Saunderson was of unsound mind and unable to plead, ordering that he be detained during Her Majesty's pleasure. He was removed to Broadmoor Criminally Lunatic Asylum in Berkshire, where contemporary sources suggest he spent the rest of his life. Later records indicate he died there quietly in 1943, aged 69, a long and uneventful coda to a single night of violence that had once held London spellbound. As for the mysterious Kensington stabbings, they simply melted away. After weeks of fear, women attacked at random by a veiled stranger who taunted her victims. The incidents ceased as abruptly as they had begun. No one ever caught, and no convincing explanation emerged. It is tempting, though impossible to prove, to wonder if the two stories were somehow connected. The stabbings stopped almost exactly when Saunderson was arrested, and the timing is hard to ignore. Whether he was in fact the elusive woman in black, or whether the parallel was pure coincidence, the effect was the same. Once Saunderson disappeared behind Broadmoor's walls, both the murder of Augusta Dawes and the strange stabbing spree slipped from London's headlines into uneasy memory. Further particulars. And so, Kensington's strange winter of knives and veils drew to a close. Saunderson was locked safely behind Broadmoor's gates, and the mysterious woman in black who had stalked Stanhope Gardens simply melted into memory. But the idea of a dark, silent figure roaming the night is harder to lock away. A few winters on, that shadow seems to slip its London bounds and drift across the countryside, turning up in all places on a lonely Buckinghamshire crossroads. There, locals whispered of a headless woman in black who stood unmoving in the dark, startling horses and sending even stout-hearted farmers bolting for home. From the Illustrated Police News, the 8th of January, 1898, a headless ghost in Buckinghamshire. The people of Buckingham and neighbourhood are troubled at the appearance of a ghost, the truth of which is vouched for by a well-known farmer living in the neighbourhood. About 6 miles from the outskirts of the town there stands a weather-beaten handpost at the corner of Four Cross Road. Also a small plantation of young oak saplings at the terminus. Near to this spot, some few nights ago, the farmer referred to, accompanied by a friend, was driving his horse and trap along the roadway. The night was well advanced and dark, when suddenly the farmer saw standing a few yards in front of him a black object. "What's that?" he said to his friend, and aloud to the figure, "Hello! Move on, please." There was no answer, and the figure remained almost motionless. It was completely enveloped in a long black sheet, and had the ghastly appearance of a headless woman. Simultaneously, the horse saw it and trembled like a leaf, as if paralyzed with fear. Again the farmer cried, "What do you do there? Move on, please." But there was no response, and the apparition remained still. The horse became restive and commenced backing into a ditch. At this stage, the driver's companion got down, took the reins, and endeavoured to back by the spot. There, for a minute or so, their queer visitant disappeared, as the trap again faced the roadway, but the occupants were greatly alarmed at the further appearance of the black sombre figure a few yards ahead of them, in the same motionless position as before. The situation was now getting positively serious. The farmer, whose presence of mind had stood him in good stead, now finding his nerve on the point of giving way, asked the apparition in the name of God to speak. Then it was that the spectre slowly glided away and appeared to float through the thick-set bordered hedge. The animal at once galloped off at a rattling pace towards the village they were bound for. Other people in the district have related their experiences, and the belief now prevails that there is a ghost to be seen, and not a little surprisingly, the spot referred to has been less frequented of late. Ah, yes, well now, dear friends, it appears the tale has all tales must reach its final chapter. Villains undone, loose ends neatly gathered, and, I dare say, a most satisfactory conclusion all round. Now, should any amongst you feel discontented, perhaps wishing for more, you may, in theory, direct your sentiments to the script writer, although, between ourselves, she has rather melted away, like the last hymn note on a Sunday afternoon. Most elusive. That said, and this is rather important, should you have enjoyed our little gathering, it falls to me in my modest and wholly non-threatening capacity to gently remind you to like, subscribe, and share. Yes, quite so. A trifling effort on your part, but one that will surely keep the wheels of narrative turning and assist in keeping the algorithm, that strange and invisible parishioner, most agreeably pacified. Go forth then and spread the word. There shall be more sermons, episodes to come. And the one more delicate matter before we part company, for those who find themselves still peckish for scandal and mystery, might I whisper a suggestion? Our Patreon parlour stands ever open, a veritable cabinet of curiosities, with daily uploads and now boasting more than 720 ad-free episodes, all neatly catalogued by topic and era to suit any mood and open for your perusal 24/7. It costs but £5 a month after a generous 1-week free trial and provides everything at your fingertips, every midnight murder, every drawing room scandal, and every perfectly sharpened clue. Do, of course, act only if the spirit moves you, but those who do step through that particular door are assured of a very warm welcome and a lot of read while the candles burn low. Find our extensive library at News of the Times Historical Crime at patreon.com. This has been News of the Times, and I am Robin Coles, part-time crime historian, full-time fog consultant, and the only man licensed to wave a lantern and mutter ominously on the embankment.